joining us from. So welcome. All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and get started. As I noted, your cameras are automatically off, your mics are automatically muted, but please use the chat throughout today to communicate, ask questions, and post resources. But hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us and welcome to today's webinar, Safe Spaces, How Digital Environments Can Serve Youth. My name's Jackie Zimmerman, and I'm the manager of public education partnerships and e-learning at our national office, and I'll be helping moderate today's session. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed out to all registrants within 1 week. We currently do not offer CEUs, but if you would like to request a certificate of attendance, we have a form that you can fill out to request one of those. I'll post that link in the chat here shortly once we're started, and that will also be included in your follow-up email. We are right around that back to school time for many young people, adults, and adults who have young people in their lives, which at MHA is always a time that we really want to focus our energy and resources on those young folks. And this year specifically, we're taking a look at technology's impact on youth mental health in both positive and negative ways. Our back to school toolkit has been released and has a variety of resources on how technology is impacting youth mental health, how youth are consuming content, what type of content they're consuming, how parents and adults can take steps to protect youth online, how to encourage positive use of social media, what online communities can be beneficial to young people, which we're going to talk about here today, and a lot of the just impacts of social media on mental health. So, like I said, today we'll be talking about some of those benefits of healthy online spaces, what types of supports are available through technology for youth, and how to encourage that safe and healthy online use. And now I'd love to introduce our speakers today before we jump into our discussion. We have 4 fantastic panelists joining us. First, I will introduce with us, we have Yuan Huang, who is the Youth Link Manager at Centerlink with over 10 years of experience in youth programming. Since 2011, he's managed and coordinated various youth programs to improve the well-being of youth, equip youth with leadership and life skills, build safer spaces for a diverse group of youth. He's especially interested in listening and responding to the needs of queer and trans immigrant youth of color and bridging the gap between youth and their parents, families, and culture. When he's not working, Yuan likes playing video games, watching anime, practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and trying new recipes. Welcome, Yuan. With us, we also have Dr. Tanya Battle, who is a licensed clinical psychologist who earned a doctorate of psychology specializing in child and adolescence. Her clinical interests have included psychological and neuropsychological evaluations, children and adolescents, and trauma and mood disorders. She's recognized the gap in care for marginalized communities and founded Battle Clinical Services. This private practice focuses on destigmatizing mental health while employing evidence-based strategies to meet clients' needs, particularly within the BIPOC community. With more than 15 years of experience in corporate leadership, mental health counseling and advocacy, and academia, Dr. Battle aims to employ a unique and holistic approach to client wellness. She actively collaborates with leaders within the community in raising awareness around mental health, facilitating trauma support groups, and promoting mental health awareness and suicide prevention programs. Welcome, Dr. Battle. With us, we also have Dr. Whitney Ragland Bignall, who is the Associate Clinical Director of the On Our Sleeves Movement for Children's Mental Health and a pediatric psychologist at Nationwide Children's Hospital. Before joining the On Our Sleeves team, Dr. Ragland Bignall worked at a primary care center that served a primarily low-income and racially diverse community. She implemented a program to help enhance parenting skills for raising young children. She built partnerships with community organizations, primary care offices, and neighborhood schools. Dr. Bignall was named the Who's Who in Black Columbus list in 2019 and is a 40 under 40 leader in minority health Award winner, the National Minority Equality Forum, and the Congressional Black Caucus. Welcome, Dr. Eglin Bignell. And with us, we also have Cecilia Micco, who is a New York City-based mental health activist, nonprofit executive director, co-author, public speaker, consultant, and former radio astronomer. Cecilia is autistic and also happens to have schizophrenia, but they do not let their diagnoses define them. They're the founder and executive director of the global nonprofit Students with Psychosis. Welcome, Cecilia. And welcome to all of our speakers. I am so thrilled that each of you could join us here today for this important discussion, and what a group we have. We'll dive right into it and just go ahead and get started. So we know that this topic, technology and digital health, it's only growing and seeming to expand in our lives. There's always new platforms coming out, or new things to keep up with, and especially for the lives of young people, young adults and youth. And I think often in the mental health space, we hear about the negative impacts of technology, which are definitely out there. But online spaces provide an opportunity for mental health benefits for young people, and they're already out there and they're using the technology, and we don't see that stopping. So I'd love to talk a little bit about the opportunity that online spaces provide for support, community, and education, and how you have seen online spaces positively impacting the mental health of youth and young adults, both personally and professionally. And whoever would like to jump in, go for it.
I can go ahead and jump in. So when it comes to some positive effects of community building on like an online platform, I know for me personally, I'm someone living with schizophrenia. And when I first opened up about my schizophrenia, it was difficult on finding fellow peers. And by finding online communities was ways that I found fellow peers. Also, I want to highlight that an online platform can be more accessible to some of our community members as well. As someone who is autistic and also someone who struggles with schizophrenia, I also struggle with isolation at times. So I absolutely love that there are communities that you can engage with, whether it's text-based or audio calls, if you're struggling with your isolation, even from underneath your covers and such. I know sometimes those are the times that I need to connect and find support the most, are the times that I'm struggling in like a dark place in my head under my covers, and having a access to community, access to talking to someone, access to getting outside of my head is really empowering to me. So that's a positive way that community platforms online can make it more accessible of reaching out for help and connecting with fellow peers.
I can go next if that's okay with you. For the other panelists, I want to echo what Cecilia has said. So I manage a project called QChat, which provides professionally facilitated support groups for LGBTQ teens. And our space has shown to be very valuable for these young people. And most of them are living in remote areas with little in-person support, such as community centers, support groups, or any kind of school support for LGBTQ teens. Or they might be living in a household or an area that is very anti-LGBTQ. So the only source of support that they can access is online, as well as forming connection with others and finding information. That can only be done online with their phone or their laptop. And in these online spaces, safe online spaces, it's enticing for these young people, especially for folks who are trying new names or different kind of pronouns, and just downright privacy protection, especially when they're not out yet to their parents. Having these kind of safe places where they can be themselves, but also how to get out really quickly and protect themselves is really valuable. I think information spreads emerges and spreads faster. Every day there's a new flag that's being created by the community, and a lot of them are adopting them. So that gives a sense of positive reinforcement that they are okay to be who they are. And hyperconnection means it's easier to find information. Even just 10 years ago, in my experience, it was super difficult to find reputable information about LGBTQ issues, especially trans health. They were very far in between. Now, with a little bit of research, and anyone can find reputable information from very reliable sources, and it has spread very widely. Downside is, at the same time, it is also easier to find anti-LGBTQ plus info, but let's focus on the positive side, that LGBTQ youth are finding information easier than ever.
And I would like to just echo what both of the other presenters have indicated. Additionally, I think that the online community enables youth to be more self-expressive. They can create content, they can find new and different ways of connecting in a positive way. Yes, we are all well aware of some of the downsides, but I think also it bears mentioning the fact that it is a platform where they can be creative and self-expressive. As well as, of course, what the other two speakers have indicated, making these connections can be positive, especially for those persons that are dealing with isolation, any type of like social aversion. It creates basically a playground where they can engage as they feel comfortable engaging.
I love what everyone has said. I don't want to duplicate. I think social media provides opportunities to practice new things, new communication skills, and being different than maybe you have done before. One of the things that I've heard from lots of people that I talk with, my patients and youth in the community, is that they learn about different things. And so sometimes in certain communities, they have limited access to things. And so now it's opening up their space to learn about new things, try new things that they may not have known before. And so now they're interested in a new career or a new hobby or a new they didn't even know they liked anime or something like that until they were on social media, and now they're meeting a new community that they can relate with, but maybe the community that they see face to face, they may not connect with as easily, or maybe they're more isolated, and so they're having challenges in that way. So I think learning and education has definitely been something very positive that can happen on social media as well, along with other things that the other panelists have said.
And also, sorry.
Go ahead.
What Dr. Reglan Bignall just mentioned also about explorative, like exploring new and different areas. As someone who works in academia as well, it is also an opportunity for them to become, as they're doing that exploration, to get noticed if they choose to go into higher ed, move from high school or whatever, going into higher education, that arena. There are ways where they can now be recognized by colleges by using the platform as well.
I kind of want to reinforce exploration from the LGBTQ's perspective. As I briefly mentioned, in my support groups, it's so frequent that a youth changes their name almost every chat to really explore which name fits them the best, or even the pronouns, from neopronouns to different kind of pronouns. It changes every day, and we make sure that our chat space is a safe space with other supportive teens as well as adults who are trained and verified. This is a safe place for them to do that, and nobody's gonna rebuke them or say that it's quote unquote stupid that they're changing their names or their pronouns every day. This is a safe spot to do so, and they can do it as many times as they want.
Love that, Yuan. And I think it's so important, especially for youth that might not have that space in person to have exploration like that. And just knowing historically, prior to technology, there wasn't a lot of spaces where individuals could explore their identity and their sexuality in safe places, or where they wouldn't know if when they expressed that it would be a safe space or not. And so it's wonderful that we have platforms like yours out there that youth can go to already knowing that it will be a safe space for them. Um, those were all really, really great suggestions, and you all sparked things that I hadn't even, started to consider as I thought about that question. Because often, when we're in the mental health world, we're thinking of what formal supports are available for youth online. But there's so many incredible informal benefits of technology. Like Cecilia, you said, sometimes it's just needing that immediacy of, I have a need right now and I'm feeling really down, or I'm really struggling, and I'm not in a physical environment where I can get that support I need, but now it's available through technology, or for me to find an escape or something to do. So I really appreciate those. I know as we're talking about, safe online spaces and what resources look like, um, I would love to hear from you about what some of those supports that you might suggest or utilize look like, examples of mental health supports online, either those formal or informal, if you have any suggestions of resources that haven't already been mentioned in our discussion. Or just anything you found personally or professionally useful.
Uh, I absolutely love the forum or the website for NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness. They have a lot of information, and they also have segments where they can create like little chat rooms and living rooms for persons of all ages. So I'm a fan of NAMI, as well as your local behavioral health departments. I love them. They all have tapped into the online presence and often are offering many different things around mental health and teen awareness. And then recently, I had an opportunity to connect with Walgreens Expressions. That is a program where youth are able to creatively submit information, or not necessarily information, but like projects, artistic projects, fine art or performing art, all of that, so that they can compete in a national contest. And it's all around how they decide to show mental health in new and different ways as it relates to their experiences. So those are some areas where I have found very beneficial.
Yes, I can go next. So some of the safe spaces that, before I plug in my own, because I want to lay down the foundation, is that we definitely look for places that are possibly supported by evidence and research. One of the tools that Centerlink, my organization developed, is called IME Guide, which is a science-backed mental health tool created by and for LGBTQ teens. But anybody can access the tool right now because it is a website. It is not barred. So definitely search for something that has some form of science and evidence and research. And then also supported by legitimate organizations. Doing your research, like searching their website, social media, Google reviews before actually participating really helps. Google reviews can be interesting, but take it as a grain of salt. QChat Space, my organization, is supported by mainly 3 national organizations: the Centerlink, the Community of LGBTQ Centers, PFLAG National, and Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Planned Parenthood, some of you might all know, it's not specifically mental health, but they can still point you to your local health agencies where they can provide mental health support. They have great chat, both talking to a person or by a bot. I think it's called Roo for teens, as well as PFLAG National. PFLAG is a chapter-based support groups for LGBTQ community. And many of them do virtual meetings where they would do local chapter meetings virtually. And if you're looking for any local specific resources, this could be a great chance to get some peer support and talk to people in the chapter to find that specific local resources specifically for LGBTQ mental health. And last but not least, Centerlink has a directory for our member LGBTQ centers where you can search for LGBTQ centers or organizations nearby you, and they might know any LGBTQ affirming mental health organizations, individuals. Some of them might have their own directory where they have mental health professionals in their own region. So it's always a good idea to search for the centers nearby you and then inquiring them. So those are my resources. Another thing that I do suggest is that look for places that, possibly publicly discloses information such as their limitation, what you're agreeing to, and what to do when something seems wrong. At QChessace, we disclose our limitation of our spaces, such as that we do not provide crisis intervention, and the fact that facilitators are not any kind of medical professionals, and they are also mandated reporters. So here are our limitations. The youth and their parents, supportive parents, can decide to join if they agree and they're okay with our limitations. And approach them, ask questions, send an email, send a message in the social media, and get answers from real people. That's a good indicator, in my opinion, that this could be a safe space for you.
Don't have too much to add. What I really wanted to just highlight was that, researching is really good and important. And so I often will say, it's good to connect with things that are around you and your community. And so, yes, not having a national, connecting with those things can be great, but it is also nice when you are seeing what's in your actual community. And so then connecting with them online can be really, really powerful. And so there's lots of different youth serving organizations that are in my community. And that's often where I will have youth look first, because if they're connecting with people and they find support there, it would be great to be able to find support, not just on the screen, but other times there might be other ways to find support face to face too, when you're doing something that's within your actual community that you live.
To piggyback off of that, I absolutely agree on looking at local resources as well. I know for me, when it comes to like living in New York, I'm a huge fan of the clubhouse model, such as Fountain House. If you have that here in New York, but also if you don't live in New York City, there's also Clubhouse International. And you would be surprised on how many, like what seemingly are like in-person resources also, especially after or at this timeline with the pandemic, have shifted into also offering online platforms or virtual ways that club members, clubhouse members, or members can get engaged. So when it comes to looking at for virtual resources, looking at those in person and seeing if they have that option of getting involved virtually as well.
Absolutely. Thank you all for those. They're great recommendations. There's so many ways to get involved with local and national organizations and groups through technology, whether that be through support groups, through those local chapters that might have virtual options, which is always great and can be a good introduction. Sometimes taking that first step can be really scary of showing up in person, and especially for a young person, and especially if it's in a community that they're living in of who's going to see me there, or just that stigma that's still around getting services and getting help. And so sometimes that online option is just feels a little more comfortable, a little more safe, and then might open them up to feeling more comfortable to receiving some community support or in-person support. Just a few other resources I'll throw in there for everyone that's listening. The different hotlines and warm lines that you can call are great for times of immediate support if you're needing it. So of course, our 988 is a great number to call. I know there's lots of other organizations that have specific hotlines for LGBTQ plus folks. For folks who are veterans, if you're an adult needing support, RAIN has another support line, all of those, and then warm lines as well for if you're not in crisis, but you might be having one of those times where you're needing to talk to someone. You can check out, I'll post some links to our MHA affiliates host different warm lines, and some of our warm lines are now focused for young adults, staffed by other young adults that peer support. So those are emerging and continuing to grow as we see from the pandemic, this continuation of virtual supports, which is great. I'm going to pivot us a little bit in our conversation. I know we've talked a little bit about this already, but I'd love to hear more about how you've seen that peer support help youth engage with others who might be similar to themselves, and connect in spaces they might not be able to find in person. And so often, depending on if you're living in a rural area or an area where you might just be a minority of your sort, that you can't find that connection to someone that you feel understands what you're going through or that you can relate to. And for youth, that can be really hard. So I'd just like to hear a little bit about how you've seen online spaces provide that support.
Simple example that I can give is that, so many, patients and families still have stigma when they get a diagnosis. And, it's the first inkling is to hide it, not to share. And so when they get on social media and there are people who are putting real life experience about, being diagnosed or overcoming or therapies that have worked for them or how they had to try things, it gives, I've heard so many people say, we weren't going to try that until we saw someone who did. And then they shared how it worked. And so now we're willing to talk to you now. We wouldn't have come in without seeing that. And so sometimes it's, your doctor might recommend it, but you're not ready. And then you see someone who looks like you, who did try it and had success. And so I see that often, that they'll say, I came in and to see you because I saw someone's post and that made me, take the first step.
I can definitely echo that. In QChat space, we currently have a youth advisory panel. One of them, the one group is called Q Chatters, where they are chat participants who become like role models for other chat participants. And it definitely makes a difference. We do have adult facilitators who are fully facilitating the conversation, but I can definitely sense the difference when the youth talks to other youth. And they share that similar experiences as Dr. Wynia shared, such as coming out to parents and school issues. It's been like over 10 years since I attended school. So my school issue that I've experienced might be completely different than the current school issues that they're going through, or talks about specific issues within TikTok. I don't even have a TikTok account. They can have a better conversation around me. So they share that shared experiences and lingo. And talking about online lingos, I'm super outdated, but online lingos like emojis, tone indicators, GIFs, they all enrich the communication and connect the youth differently than fully text-based education, text-based communication. It's super fun, engaging, and it's the language on their own, and they connect better like that. I see it within the chat space that youth are actively finding information for each other. They're recommending it, they're comparing them, and then they're deciding which one works best for each other or for themselves. And I also see that youth get the more opportunity to connect with others that are outside of their own city, state, and countries. They're sharing information with each other that are outside of their own physical boundaries and support that goes beyond these physical boundaries. And it's really interesting and supportive to see that. And youth leadership and peer support is already happening in many online spaces. I can see that in Twitch and YouTube streaming. Some of the youth, I think quite a number of youth are maintaining and creating their own servers in Discord. And that requires so much work. I don't think I can do that even. It requires planning, it requires problem solving, teamwork, and communication. So peer support is already happening in these kind of areas without us knowing.
Yeah, piggybacking off of what was shared, I think that another amazing part of having a virtual platform, and I was mentioned earlier about just how many people you can connect with outside of your location and such. I know for me, when it comes to, I work at the nonprofit Students with Psychosis, we offer over 160 hours of facilitated virtual programming every single month. And we have students and advocates located all over the world. And something that I've definitely have seen there is the learning of different perspectives of what it's like to like live with schizophrenia. I live in New York City. What it's like to live it with schizophrenia in New York City could be a different experience than living in a different place in the world. And it's great to hear those different perspectives and also the shared commonalities as well. I think that that's a very beautiful thing to engage with. Also touching on the accessibility again when it comes to a virtual environment. Something that I love about virtual environments is sometimes you can shift into just text-based communication. I think oftentimes in society, we judge people based off of how well they articulate a word. And when it comes to having a virtual space, I know at times I struggle with scattered thoughts, I struggle with word salad. So when it comes to texting, I feel like I can get my communication across better at times. So when it comes to having that virtual communication, having where text space is normalized and such can really empower an individual where that's their preferred or the way that they communicate and prefer to communicate in.
Absolutely. Thank you all for those really, really great points. And thank you all in the chat. I see you adding different resources and questions and comments. If we do have some time at the end, just a reminder, we'll go through some of those questions you have. So thank you all for continuing to engage in there, and thank you, speakers. I want to talk a little bit since most of our audience here is adults who are supporting youth in various ways, whether that be through their work, personally as a parent or caregiver, or in the community. And I think it's important to identify, there's been so many great ways that you all have identified as how social media and technology can be a positive, all of the really great ways that youth can be engaging in these safe spaces, that there are spaces that are intended to be safe and private and inclusive for youth online. But unfortunately, there's the bad and negative side of technology and online spaces as well. So how can adults look for signs that indicate that youth are engaging with online spaces in healthy and positive ways versus unhealthy and negative ways for their mental health?
I think that the number one thing that I ask parents to do is to be aware of their own social media use, and keep in mind that they're mirroring appropriate use. So if they're constantly distracted or their kids are seeing the tops of their heads, you know, more than their eyes, that could be problematic. So I think that the first step for parents in monitoring is making sure that they have a healthy interaction with social media, and then echoing that interaction with their kids, being a participant in where, you know, the platforms that they're participating on. It's not really, you know, helicoptering, but it's a discussion and an open discussion. Oops, sorry.
Agree so much with what Dr. Battle just mentioned. And I would add, you know, with those conversations, I know they can be somewhat tricky because you want your youth in your life to be open about what they're actually doing, not feeling like they're in trouble or being penalized. And so like our website on our sleeves, we have actual conversation starters to help parents and guardians to have those conversations. But really, it should be very open and non-judgmental and going with curiosity about who they follow and what sites are they on and why they like it and what it does for them. Like having those curious conversations can go a long way. And making sure, you know, with them, like what it's bringing to their life, right? So we're talking about health. So we want to know, like, what are the positives about what they're doing and then breaking that down. And I think having an agreement across the household about what social media usage looks like can be really helpful. And we actually have a document on our website too that can help families think through like what that can look like for us to keep it healthy and positive in our household. So I think it's really important to have those conversations and remembering that sometimes kids will think, oh man, I'm in trouble. They're asking me these questions. And so it's important to have them all the time and being interested, not just in what they're doing online, but in many aspects of their life.
I think adding on to the discussion there, when it comes to looking at different online platforms to engage, like as a parent with a child looking into different online platforms or a young adult, making sure that there is like that time to like review the community guidelines of an online platform. I think that's very, very important whenever joining an online platform to take that time to read over the community guidelines. It might not be the most fun thing to read over and such, but it's very beneficial. Particularly some things to look into is what is their privacy policies, what is their policies around direct messaging, and having like that discussion about when engaging onto a platform, the difference of engaging in like a facilitated group versus say if a member direct messages you. Also looking at like what are the reporting processes as well. If someone is making you feel uncomfortable, do you talk to the moderator? Is there a link to anonymously report an issue? Also making sure that there are things in the community guidelines as well to make sure it is a safe space for LGBTQ plus youth and individuals within other intersections as well, making sure that the community guidelines is touching upon issues that is relevant to you.
Yeah, I think nothing what I would say would be new. Definitely not monitoring them secretly by looking at their phone secretly or history when they're not looking. Heard stories from the chatters that this happens quite frequently, and I'm always saddened by that. So that's definitely a no-no. And just definitely a discussion based. Ask questions like genuine care, interest and care. Like how are things if you know that they're using TikTok or if you know that they're viewing Twitch, you know, how are things going? What's your favorite followers? Why do you you know, what are some of the things that you like about them? Is there something do you like, dislike? That genuine interest will definitely be translated when you ask those questions. At QChat Space, when we have adults reaching out about their youth, their child participating, we do encourage their adults to explore the chat topics in advance, see which topics that they can explore with their child and have a discussion about the chat before and after. How did the chat go? At IME, anyone can view the site and forward specific pages or activities to the youth. So both the adult and youth can view the pages. There is also a safer browsing tips at IME, which I will drop the link. Definitely something that you could also have a discussion about parents, guardians, and their child together.
Yeah, I would also like to say that I know for parents, it's social media is intimidating for many parents in and of themselves. So I think that any place or space where education can be reciprocal and combined or joint with parent and child, I think that would also help parents feel more empowered, because what I hear from a lot of families when I'm doing family therapy, I hear a lot of parents say, I just don't understand. And when the child is trying to articulate, well, this is why, like, this is what is there not to understand? There's sometimes a disconnect because of generational gaps or conversations. Because I know when I was a teenager, the social media did not exist. I know I look 20, but it did not exist. So it is very scary, and it's very, very new. So as much education and conversation that can be had between parents and the youth, I think that will go a long way in terms of even protecting the youth, because you're better equipping the guardians and the parents.
Absolutely, Dr. Battle. That's a great point. I just had a conversation with my own mom the other day about this, who's an educator, and she's been an educator for 30 years, 30 plus years. And it can definitely just that generational difference. And young people these days, they're able to catch on so quickly as they grew up with technology, and it almost seems to come second nature. And for parents and adults, when it doesn't, that can be so frustrating. And it's easy to feel overwhelmed and not even know where to start to gain those resources and information. So I really appreciate Dr. Eglin Bignall, you providing the information about your different guides. Those are super helpful. And yes, just trying to find those resources that you can. I'm going to also post in the chat here a few links for some back to school resources that we have that have similar information and guides. And like Cecilia said, taking the time to look at those community guidelines, that can be tedious and it can seem silly, but they're so helpful to really see what the different options are for parents to be involved, to know even what happens on each platform of capabilities of, can my youth be interacting in direct messages on this, or is it just that they're seeing what others are being posted? Are they seeing things that people they're following are being posted, or is the algorithm feeding them other types of content that they're not even engaging with? So looking through all of those community guidelines are really helpful. And I think too, in the community guidelines, which kind of brings me to my next point of discussion, is that within those community guidelines, it explains what parents can do on the back end to set up different types of controls and different ways to help monitor youth online. And I know that that can become really dicey because, like Yuan had said, how do you create that trust, that transparency with youth while also letting them be autonomous in their use and not feel like you don't trust them, or that if they're using it in ways like engaging with something like Centerlink and they haven't come out yet, how can they be monitored? So I just love to hear kind of your opinions and suggestions for adults and caregivers on how to best engage when it comes to those parental controls, and what can be beneficial with those, or what could potentially be more harmful with those.
I'm just going to start off by saying I think it's important to be proactive. I think I mentioned this a little earlier, but having conversations about what it looks like to have healthy social media presence. So when does it not look healthy and what does healthy look like? So if we're on something too long and it's preoccupying our time or we can't continue to do our day to day, is that healthy or not healthy? And I think a dialogue with the teen about expectations, right? About what should the parent expect? I would want to hear from the teen, from themselves, what they're thinking about. And they really are brilliant and they will give good answers. And so sometimes I think we want to prescribe something immediately and then we get pushback. But I think having that open conversation about what healthy looks like and developing a plan together goes a really long way. But then also along with that plan, talking about what the safeguards are, like how do they help the parent feel comfortable in providing this access? For instance, parents have to decide if their kid is going to drive or not, right? And they usually have some kind of thing that they put into place to make sure everyone is safe. And so in the same way, with this privilege, how can the child provide the parent with assurance that they can keep their end of the bargain when it comes to safety and the expectations that they have within the home? So I think it's a really good place to have good conversation as families.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Go ahead, Cecilia. Go ahead.
okay, thank you. I agree with that when it comes to making sure like you have that preparation and talking with your youth like ahead of time. And in those conversations, I think that it can be very empowering for the individual to be reminded about what are their personal values when it comes to what are they looking for in online environments. Just like how I said earlier about like reading the community guidelines for an online platform, also looking at what are the values of a community platform or organization that you're engaging with, and a way to talk to your youth and maybe in a way that's like engaging and empowering in this way can be sitting down and working together on what's that youth's personal set of values. I know for me, I had a mentor that sat down with me and we put down like what is my personal vision and values for my personal life, and let's see if it matches up with the organization that I'm engaging in. Also, some other educational material talking over is discussing like looking at how do people have access to this online community. Is it a public platform? Is it a platform that if anyone pays a certain amount on Patreon that they automatically get access to it? Or is it a platform that you have an application and you get verified and it's like you have like verified with like your .edu email or that you're a student or whatnot. So just also like things to look for in online communities on like who has access to it, and also sitting down with your youth on putting together their own personal vision and values.
Yeah, definitely agree with the boundaries. So communicating with your youth about boundaries, like what are some of the boundaries of yourself as a parent, what are the boundaries of the youth, and sharing that openly, and what to do if those boundaries are quote unquote broken, and what to do to kind of support the situation. I want to preface that I don't have much experience working with parents, because my experience come with more working with youth. So some of these that I'm saying is coming from the youth that I've worked for the past almost 15 years now. I definitely do recommend parents to work with a sense of partnership instead of authority. That creates a whole different kind of power dynamics, being aware of what kind of power as a parent you might have to the youth. I know they're your child, but they are growing and they're growing to be an adult. So what are some of the things that can, in terms of power dynamics, that needs to be shifted? We talked about genuine interest and care, instead of being quote unquote nosy, that you're truly interested in what they're interested in when trying to learn more. This really comes in, especially for the LGBTQ youth, that the parents or the guardians should be informed. Educate yourself on different kind of issues and topics that affect your child, especially when they're LGBTQ teen. Don't expect the youth to educate you. They have their own stuffs to deal with. They're already busy, their headspace is full. So you need to educate yourself with reliable sources. Something I encourage personally is to learn quote unquote science behind what's going on in these teenage years, like what's being developed physically or psychologically. This, I believe, really helps you to understand why your teen is quote unquote acting or saying something. And it's an opportunity for you to realize what's going on, step back at the moment, and then decide what's the next step instead of just reacting immediately to your teen acting out or saying something that could anger you. Communicate with them that you're always there to support them. It is non-judgmental. Like no matter what they do, you are their parent or guardian, so you're there to support them. That way, when they do come out to you, then they're not gonna think my parents gonna disown me because I'm gay or I'm trans. Just constantly communicating that will help them ease that kind of anxiety when they're coming out to you. Yeah.
I'd also like to comment too on the fact that youth is a very general category. So with all of the suggestions that the panelists have given, or which are awesome, we also have to be mindful of the age of the child. I have parents often ask me, well, at what age should I allow my children to engage in some of these online platforms? And of course, my answer is always, it depends. The parent knows the child best. But definitely approaching it from as they get older, I think collaboration is key. But when they're younger, I think definitely that gentle parenting of setting boundaries, because there are just some things out there that are just hard nose. And there really isn't a discussion that needs to be had. It's just, this is not appropriate for your age. So I think that, again, working with parents and empowering them, because not every child is the same, and not every platform is created equally. So this is definitely one that must involve a lot of care and attention and collaboration.
Thank you for that point, Dr. Battle. It's very true. And as we're talking youth, that can mean so many different things in different ages, and those conversations look very different at different times. And, parents do like to ask that question, or caregivers, of at what age? And, there isn't that magic number of what's right for you and your family and your child. But again, referencing community guidelines too, of understanding that there's an age that you have to be, and then beyond then, what is our family's expectation of engaging on those different types of platforms. I love all of the points brought up. I think something that resonated with me early on in our discussion was Dr. Reglin Bignall, you had said, engaging youth in those conversations of asking them what they think is acceptable, and Cecilia getting into their values. And I know even for myself, one thing that I found super helpful is the time limits on apps, because we can all get stuck in the dreaded scroll, and you don't realize how fast time goes by. And so that, I know, has really helped me just stay accountable for how much time am I actually spending on my phone and on social media. And that can be a tool too. That's one of those ways that you can have that discussion with your youth about what do you think is an acceptable time, or what do you feel comfortable with, and kind of talk about it together, to set those expectations. And that is a control they can add in their phone that's not giving away any privacy to them. That's not asking for you to be able to see their accounts, to have access to messages, things like that. But it's just one way to start to have those conversations and build that trust around the use of technology. So thank you all for those really great suggestions. I know that we're nearing the end of our time here together, and to be respectful of your time and everyone else's, I just want to wrap up with one of our last questions we had. And I know we've touched on this already, but I wanted to see if there were any other thoughts that our panelists wanted to share. A big point and takeaway, I think, from today is the importance of communication and having discussions with youth. whatever your capacity might be working with youth, whether that is as a parent or caregiver, as someone who's working with youth professionally, if you're working in the community and you're before or after school with youth a lot who are on technology, or you're a teacher and phones are allowed at your school during the daytime, all of those types of things. So as adults, we've talked about some techniques that we can use to talk to youth about their engagement on social media. Cecilia mentioned talking about values. Dr. Eglin Bignall talked about starting the conversations early and engaging youth in the conversations, along with Dr. Battle, and how we space those out at appropriate times and talk about appropriateness of use. And Yuan talking about proactive conversations, just beyond even social media use, but so that they feel comfortable coming to you with a variety of concerns. But do you have any other last techniques or tips you want to leave our audience with that adults can use to discuss safe technology use? I know we've been through a lot and all wonderful ones.
This was a really great conversation. I was just going to say what I love about this topic is that so much in the media is about how negative it can be. And so allowing the adults to think about that there are positives, and how can we make sure we're talking about the positives with our youth, as well as the ways that they can be healthy with it. And so how can we continue to have those types of conversations, I think, are really important. And so I'm just excited that I got to be a part of this wonderful conversation.
Yeah, I think in general, when I encounter people working or just have teens in general, a lot of folks are scared by the word teens or teenage years, because it's just, rebellious. You don't know where they're going. They can bounce around here and there. Don't be afraid, and just ride the waves with them. Really, they're in for a rough ride. We've all been there, and that what Dr. Whitney has said, being non-judgmental is super important. That's when you will form the most trusting relationship with the teens, riding the waves with them, instead of telling them where to go when they're in the waves, and you're on the boat. That's not gonna work out. So just don't be afraid.
And I think early on, Ewan mentioned knowing developmentally where your child, what to expect developmentally. The teen years and adolescent years in and of themselves is, it's a little bit of a roller coaster. So knowing where in the roller coaster ride you are and what to expect goes a long way in terms of how you can demystify and kind of take parents out of the, oh my God, the crisis mode of dealing with a teen or a young person. If they kind of know, okay, this is actually developmentally appropriate. So kind of drink the Kool-Aid on that, and how can you now help your child, finish this roller coaster ride together?
As an additional thought, it probably sounds pretty straightforward, but reminding that social media or virtual spaces, it's a tool, and that when it comes to having that like preparation for utilizing a tool, I think it was Dr. Bignall earlier was talking about trusting youth for like driving and such, and having certain parameters set ahead of time for that. Same with when it comes to social media use or virtual use as well. Reminding that it is a tool, and having those difficult conversations ahead of time, just like you would have those difficult conversations before you give, your youth the keys to drive a car. It can help with preparing your youth on engaging in social media virtual spaces in a safe way.
Absolutely. Thank you all for those last wonderful words of wisdom. And thank you for all that you've shared in this last hour with us. It is so appreciated by me and clearly our audience. And thank you to everyone who's been joining us, who's also been putting some really great resources, comments in the chat. Just a note as we close out, We will send out the recording within a week. We'll also include links to all of the really great resources shared by all of our speakers today. So if you weren't able to capture those in the chat, don't worry, we'll be sending those out afterwards. And we hope that you found this information useful, beneficial, and that you can carry it with you throughout this back to school time and help share with others. So thank you all so much. And thank you, Yuan, Dr. Battle, Dr. Raglan Bignall, and Cecilia. It was so wonderful to have you join us for this. Thank you. All right, everyone, have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thank you.